The dust-laden winds of 1878 whispered secrets across the plains of Arizona Territory as Nora Mitchell stumbled into the small trading post of Sweetwater Springs, her once fine dress tattered and her reputation in even worse condition. With nothing but the clothes on her back and a weathered leather satchel containing proof of her innocence, she had traversed nearly 100 miles on foot after being run out of Phoenix under a cloud of accusations that had destroyed everything she had ever known. "I need work," she announced to the stunned patrons of Garrison's general store, her voice stronger than her trembling hands suggested. "I can cook, clean, keep books, or do whatever honest labor you have available." The storekeeper, a portly man with suspicious eyes, looked her up and down. "Ain't you that Mitchell woman from Phoenix? The one they say embezzled from the bank and got the manager killed?" The hushed conversations around the store ceased immediately. Nora's chin lifted, though her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I did not steal a single penny, nor did I have anything to do with Mr. Holloway's death, but I see my reputation has preceded me even here." "We don't need no trouble in Sweetwater," a woman muttered, pulling her children closer. "I'm not bringing trouble," Nora insisted, fighting back tears of frustration. "I'm innocent of all charges. They found no proof because there was none to find." "That's what all criminals say," someone called from the back of the store. Nora turned, ready to defend herself once more, when the door swung open behind her. The man who entered cast a long shadow across the wooden floorboards, his tall frame filling the doorway before he stepped inside, spurs jingling softly with each deliberate step. Dust coated his worn leather boots and denim pants, and his face remained shadowed beneath the wide brim of his hat. "Afternoon, folks," he drawled, nodding to the gathered crowd before turning to the storekeeper. "Mr. Garrison, I've got that delivery you've been waiting on." "Wade Daugherty," the storekeeper's demeanor changed instantly. "Right on time as always. Bring it around back and I'll have my boy help unload." Nora stepped aside, hoping to become invisible, but the newcomer's gaze lingered on her for a moment too long. There was no judgment in his blue eyes, only a quiet assessment that made her feel unexpectedly seen. "Never known you to turn away a customer in need, Garrison," Wade said casually, though there was steel beneath his words, especially not before hearing them out proper. "This ain't about business," Garrison protested. "This woman's wanted in Phoenix." "Is she now?" Wade turned fully toward Nora. "Madam, are you running from the law?" "No," Nora answered firmly, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm running from injustice. There are no warrants for my arrest because they couldn't prove their false accusations, but that didn't stop them from destroying my life and my father's good name." A muscle twitched in Wade's jaw. "And what brought you all the way to Sweetwater?" "A chance to start over where no one knows me," she replied honestly. "Or so I thought." Wade studied her for a long moment before turning back to Garrison. "I'll vouch for her." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the store. Nora herself couldn't hide her shock. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Wade shrugged. "I'm a fair judge of character. Besides, everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves." "They called me a liar," Nora said softly, her voice catching. The cowboy's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "Then I'll be the proof you tell truth," he replied, just loud enough for her to hear. "My ranch needs help, and I pay fair wages for honest work." Garrison's face reddened. "Wade, you can't just—" "Last I checked, this is still a free country where a man can hire who he pleases," Wade interrupted. "Unless you've got proof she's wanted by the law." The storekeeper sputtered but couldn't produce evidence. "That's what I thought." Wade turned back to Nora. "The offer stands if you're interested. Room, board, and fair wages at the Double D. It's not fancy living, but it's honest work." Nora hesitated only a moment. Pride warred with desperation, but survival won out. "I accept. Thank you, Mr. Daugherty." "Wade," he corrected. "Just Wade." He gestured toward the door. "My wagon's out front. I've got deliveries to finish, then we'll head to the ranch." As Nora followed him outside, she could feel the burning stares of the townspeople through the windows. Wade seemed unbothered as he loaded crates onto his wagon. "Why did you do that?" she asked, watching him work. "Take a chance on a complete stranger with a tarnished reputation?" Wade secured the last crate before answering. 10 years ago, I rode into town with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back. People took a chance on me." He paused, looking at her directly. "Besides, I've never put much stock in rumors. Actions speak louder than words, and I figure you deserve the opportunity to let your actions speak for themselves." Nora blinked back unexpected tears. "I won't let you regret this." "See that you don't," he replied, but there was no threat in his tone. "Now, climb up. We've got 3 more stops before we head home." As the wagon pulled away from Garrison's store, Nora felt the weight of the town's judgment fading slightly. For the first time since the accusations had shattered her life 3 months ago, someone had offered her not just employment, but the chance to reclaim her dignity. She glanced at Wade's profile, strong and weathered like the Arizona landscape itself. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, seemingly unconcerned with the scandal riding beside him. Nora clutched her satchel tighter, feeling the papers inside that documented the truth evidence she had gathered, but no one in Phoenix would examine. Perhaps here, in this dust-blown corner of the territory, she might finally find justice, or at the very least, a place to begin again. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Wade's wagon made its deliveries around the small town. At each stop, Nora felt the curious and often hostile stares, heard the whispers that followed her. Wade never acknowledged them, treating her with a professional courtesy that neither confirmed nor denied the rumors. Their final stop was at the town's modest schoolhouse, where a young woman with bright eyes greeted Wade warmly. "Mr. Daugherty, I was beginning to worry you wouldn't make it before the children returned from their nature studies." "Miss Holloway," Wade tipped his hat, "I promised those books would arrive today, didn't I?" The name struck Nora like a physical blow. "Holloway?" she whispered. The schoolteacher turned to her with a polite smile. "Yes, I'm Elizabeth Holloway. I don't believe we've met." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. "Holloway from Phoenix?" Elizabeth's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, my uncle was Harold Holloway, the bank manager there." Her eyes narrowed as recognition dawned. "You're Nora Mitchell." "I had nothing to do with your uncle's death," Nora said quickly, desperately. "I was trying to help him expose the real culprits when he was conveniently found dead," Elizabeth finished coldly. "And the evidence against the real culprits mysteriously disappeared, leaving only your accusations." Wade stepped between them. "Ladies, whatever happened in Phoenix is none of your concern, Mr. Daugherty," Elizabeth cut in. Her earlier warmth completely vanished. "But you should know the kind of person you're associating with. My uncle was a good man who trusted Miss Mitchell, and it cost him his life." "Your uncle was a good man," Nora agreed, her voice trembling with emotion. "That's why he believed me when I showed him the discrepancies in the ledgers. He was helping me gather evidence against Mr. Prescott and the others when he was killed." "Lies," Elizabeth hissed. "Always more lies." "Miss Holloway," Wade said firmly, "I've brought your books as promised. Whether you accept them from Miss Mitchell's hands or mine is your choice, but I won't have this discussion in the street." Elizabeth drew herself up stiffly. "I'll accept the books, Mr. Daugherty, but I must insist you reconsider your association with this woman. Sweetwater is a respectable community." "And I'm a respectable rancher who makes his own decisions," Wade replied evenly. "Good day, Miss Holloway." He loaded the crate of books onto the schoolhouse porch himself, then guided Nora back to the wagon with a gentle but firm hand at her elbow. Once they were moving again, headed out of town, Nora released a shaky breath. "I apologize for that scene. I had no idea Harold Holloway's niece would be here." Wade kept his eyes on the road. "Seems there's quite a story you're carrying with you." "A tragedy," Nora corrected softly. "Mr. Holloway was the only person in Phoenix who believed me. He was helping me compile evidence against Bank Director Prescott and his associates when he was murdered. They made it look like suicide, then blamed me for driving him to it with false accusations." She clutched her satchel tighter. I have copies of what we found discrepancies in the ledgers, notes about unusual transfers, but no one would look at them after he died. And what made you suspect something was wrong in the first place? Wade asked, surprising her with his interest. Nora hesitated, then decided honesty was her only path forward. My father was the bank's founding manager. After his death last year, I continued working as head bookkeeper. 3 months ago, I noticed patterns in the accounts that didn't add up, large sums moving through accounts belonging to people who didn't exist, loans recorded but never disbursed. When I took my concerns to Director Prescott, he dismissed them as clerical errors. The wagon rattled over a rough patch of road before Wade spoke again. So you went over his head to Holloway. Yes, Mr. Holloway had been my father's friend. He took my concerns seriously and began his own quiet investigation. Nora's voice grew strained. A week later, he was found dead, and within days, rumors began circulating that I had been embezzling funds. They claimed I'd manipulated the books and was trying to frame others when Holloway discovered my theft. But they couldn't prove it, Wade noted. They didn't need to. The court of public opinion had already decided my guilt. My home was vandalized, no one would hire me, and even my father's oldest friends turned their backs. Nora stared at the dusty road ahead. So I gathered what little I had left and left Phoenix behind. Wade nodded slowly, processing her story as the wagon rolled through the open landscape. That explains why you've come all this way with nothing but that satchel and the clothes on your back. Everything I own is in this satchel, Nora confirmed, including the proof of what really happened at Phoenix Mercantile Bank. Proof no one wanted to see, Wade observed. Would you? The question slipped out before Nora could reconsider it. Look at my evidence, I mean. Wade cast her a sideways glance. I'm a rancher, not a banker or a lawyer. But you're the only person in 100 miles who's given me the benefit of doubt, Nora pressed. I'm not asking you to fight my battles, just to listen, to look at what they wouldn't. They crested a small rise, and Wade pulled the wagon to a halt. Before them stretched a valley with a sprawling ranch at its center, the Double D, Nora presumed. It wasn't the largest operation she'd ever seen, but it was substantial. A main house, bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings, all surrounded by corrals and stretching toward grazing land that disappeared into the distance. That's home, Wade said simply. Then he turned to face her directly. Miss Mitchell, I offered you work because everyone deserves a chance to earn their keep. I'll look at your evidence because I believe in justice. But understand this, my reputation in these parts is everything. If I find you're not being straight with me, our arrangement ends immediately. I understand, Nora said, meeting his gaze steadily. And I'm grateful for both the work and the chance to prove myself. Wade nodded once, then flicked the reins to get the horses moving again. Then welcome to the Double D, Miss Mitchell. It's not Phoenix, but it might just be what you need. As the wagon rolled toward the ranch, Nora felt a curious mixture of trepidation and hope. For 3 months she had been running away from the ruins of her life. Perhaps now she could begin running toward something instead. The Double D came alive with activity as the wagon approached. 2 ranch hands emerged from the barn, while an older woman appeared on the porch of the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. Nora straightened her posture, painfully aware of her disheveled appearance. Wade brought the wagon to a stop near the barn and set the brake. Miguel, Carlos, he called to the 2 men. Unload the supplies and see to the horses. Si, patron, the older of the 2 replied, eyeing Nora curiously. The woman from the porch approached, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her expression a blend of curiosity and caution. This must be the help you mentioned needing, she said, studying Nora with sharp eyes. Mrs. Abernathy, this is Miss Nora Mitchell, Wade introduced. She'll be taking over the household accounts and helping with domestic matters. Miss Mitchell, this is Mrs. Abernathy, who runs the household and keeps us all in line. Nora extended her hand. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Abernathy. The older woman hesitated only briefly before accepting the handshake. Welcome to Double D, Miss Mitchell. I hope you're as good with figures as Mr. Daugherty seems to think." "I assure you I am," Nora replied, grateful for the neutral welcome. Wade helped Nora down from the wagon. "Mrs. Abernathy will show you to your quarters and get you settled. Tomorrow morning we'll discuss your duties in detail." "Of course," Nora nodded, following the housekeeper toward the main house. "And Miss Mitchell," Wade called after her, "after dinner bring those documents to my study." Nora's heart leapt with hope. "I will. Thank you, Mr. Daugherty." Mrs. Abernathy led her into the house, a surprisingly comfortable two-story structure with solid furniture and clean, if simple, decor. "You'll have the small bedroom off the kitchen," she explained. "It's where the previous housekeeper stayed." "Previous housekeeper?" Nora inquired, trying to make conversation. "Got married last month to a shopkeeper in Tucson," Mrs. Abernathy explained. "Left us in a bind with the accounts all jumbled. Mr. Daugherty's been trying to straighten them out himself, but ranching doesn't leave much time for bookkeeping." The bedroom was indeed small but tidy, with a narrow bed, washstand, and chest of drawers. A small window overlooked the kitchen garden. "There's fresh water in the pitcher," Mrs. Abernathy indicated. "Dinner's at 6 sharp. Mr. Daugherty takes his meals with the hands in the bunkhouse most days, but tonight he'll dine in the house since you've arrived." She paused at the door. "Miss Mitchell, I don't know your story, and I don't need to, but Mr. Daugherty is a good man who's built something valuable here. Whatever trouble you might be carrying, don't bring it to his doorstep." "I have no intention of causing problems, Mrs. Abernathy," Nora assured her. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to work here." The housekeeper nodded curtly. "Then we'll get along fine. There's a dress in the wardrobe that might fit you left by the previous girl. You might want to freshen up before dinner." After Mrs. Abernathy departed, Nora sank onto the bed, momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Just hours ago, she'd been wandering into Sweetwater Springs with no prospects and dwindling hope. Now she had shelter, employment, and someone willing to examine her evidence. She clutched her precious satchel to her chest before carefully placing it beneath the mattress. Then she explored her small room, finding the mentioned dress a simple blue cotton garment that would indeed fit her with minimal adjustments. After washing away the dust of travel and changing, Nora felt more human than she had in weeks. Dinner was a simple but hearty affair: roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. The conversation remained politely superficial, with Wade asking general questions about her bookkeeping experience, while Mrs. Abernathy served the meal. "My father taught me accounting from the time I was old enough to add figures," Nora explained. "He believed women should understand business matters, even if society disagreed." "A progressive thinker," Wade commented. "The Double D's books aren't complicated, but they do need organizing. We've expanded operations considerably over the past 2 years." "I noticed the size of your herds as we arrived," Nora said. "How many head of cattle are you running?" "Just over 2,000 now," Wade replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "Started with barely 210 years ago." "Impressive growth," Nora acknowledged. "I look forward to helping put your accounts in proper order." After dinner, Mrs. Abernathy cleared the dishes, while Wade led Nora to his study, a modest room with a desk, bookshelves, and a small safe in the corner. "Have a seat," he offered, gesturing to a chair across from the desk, while he lit a lamp against the gathering evening darkness. Nora retrieved her satchel from her room and returned, carefully removing the documents she had risked everything to preserve. She laid them methodically on the desk. "These are copies of the original ledger pages showing the discrepancies," she explained, pointing to columns of numbers. "And these are notes Mr. Holloway made about the fictitious account holders. We traced several back to properties owned by Director Prescott through shell companies." Wade examined the documents carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm not a banker," he reminded her. "But even I can see these numbers don't add up. This account shows withdrawals of over 10,000 in a single month, but no corresponding deposits." "Exactly," Nora said, encouraged by his perception. "Money was being moved through these accounts, then disappearing. We believe it was being funneled into Prescott's mining ventures in Nevada, risky investments he couldn't finance openly through the bank." And Holloway confronted him about this? Wade asked. Nora nodded grimly. The night before he died. He told me Prescott denied everything and threatened to have him removed from his position if he pursued the matter. Then Holloway turns up dead, and you become the scapegoat, Wade concluded, leaning back in his chair. Convenient for Prescott and his associates. Very, Nora agreed bitterly. I tried taking this evidence to the sheriff, but he was Prescott's brother-in-law. The territorial judge wouldn't see me without the sheriff's endorsement. Every door closed in my face. Wade gathered the papers together carefully. This is compelling, Miss Mitchell. But without access to the original ledgers or witnesses willing to testify, it's your word against theirs. I know, Nora said quietly, the familiar despair creeping back. But you believe me? Wade met her gaze steadily. I believe you believe it, and these documents certainly suggest something underhanded was happening. Whether it was exactly as you describe, I can't say for certain. It wasn't the unequivocal support she had hoped for, but it was more than anyone else had offered. Thank you for looking, she said sincerely. That's all I asked. Wade helped her gather the papers. Keep these safe. Truth has a way of coming to light eventually, but sometimes it needs patience and persistence. As she returned to her small room that night, Nora felt a curious sense of peace despite the uncertainties that still surrounded her. For the first time in months, she wasn't entirely alone in her fight for justice. The next morning, Nora rose with the dawn, eager to begin her new duties. She dressed in the blue cotton gown, which she had hastily adjusted the night before, and made her way to the kitchen where Mrs. Abernathy was already preparing breakfast. Early riser, the housekeeper observed with approval. Good. There's coffee on the stove if you want some. Thank you, Nora said gratefully, pouring herself a cup. How can I help with breakfast? Mrs. Abernathy pointed to a basket of eggs. Those need scrambling. The men will be in from morning chores soon, hungry as bears. Working alongside the older woman, Nora quickly fell into a rhythm. By the time Wade and the ranch hands arrived for breakfast, the table was laden with eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. Smells good, Wade commented as he entered, his shirt already bearing traces of the morning's work. Miss Mitchell's a fair hand in the kitchen, Mrs. Abernathy acknowledged, surprising Nora with the praise. After breakfast, Wade showed Nora to a small room off the pantry that served as the ranch office. Stacks of receipts, ledgers, and correspondence littered every surface. I apologize for the state of things, he said, looking somewhat embarrassed by the chaos. Miss Peterson, our previous bookkeeper, tried to keep up, but the ranch grew faster than our systems for tracking expenses and income. I can see that, Nora replied, already assessing the task before her. May I organize this in whatever way seems most efficient? That's why I hired you, Wade confirmed. I need to know exactly where we stand financially, especially with the cattle drive to Tucson coming up next month. Nora nodded, mentally cataloging the steps needed. I'll start by organizing everything by date and category, then reconcile the ledgers against the receipts. Once I understand your current system, I can recommend improvements. Good. Wade seemed relieved. I'll leave you to it then. If you need anything, Mrs. Abernathy or I can help. Left alone with the disorganized records, Nora felt a spark of excitement despite the daunting task. This was familiar territory numbers, ledgers, systems of accounting. Here, at least, she knew her worth. She worked steadily through the morning, breaking only when Mrs. Abernathy called her for the midday meal. By afternoon, she had made significant progress organizing the papers and understanding the ranch's financial structure. The Double D was profitable, but its bookkeeping hadn't kept pace with its growth. Late in the afternoon, Wade stopped by to check on her progress. He leaned against the doorframe, hat in hand, watching as she sorted papers. Finding everything you need? He asked. Nora looked up, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. Yes, though your filing system is creative. A hint of a smile played at the corners of Wade's mouth. That's a polite way of saying it's a mess. Well, yes, Nora admitted, but I can see the basic framework. You've been keeping the ranch running despite the disorganization, which is impressive. Ranching, I understand, Wade said. Numbers on paper are another matter. Everyone has their strengths, Nora replied. Mine happen to include making sense of numbers on paper. And mine include knowing when to hire the right people for tasks beyond my expertise, Wade countered. How bad is it? Not bad at all, actually, Nora assured him. The ranch is quite profitable. You're just not tracking everything properly, which means you might be missing opportunities to increase that profit. Wade nodded thoughtfully. I'd appreciate any suggestions you have. I'll prepare a report once I have a complete picture, Nora promised, perhaps by the end of the week. No rush, Wade said surprisingly. Get it right rather than quick. As the days passed, Nora settled into the rhythm of life at the Double D. Each morning, she helped Mrs. Abernathy prepare breakfast before retreating to the small office to continue organizing the ranch's finances. In the afternoons, she assisted with household tasks, and each evening she joined Wade and Mrs. Abernathy for dinner, where conversation gradually became more comfortable. Wade, she discovered, was a man of few words but careful thought. He spoke of the ranch with quiet passion, describing his vision for expanding its operations and improving the quality of his stock. He listened to her suggestions about the accounts with genuine interest, implementing several of her recommendations immediately. On her fourth evening at the ranch, as they lingered over coffee after Mrs. Abernathy had retired, Wade asked the question Nora had been expecting. What will you do when the books are in order? Move on to another town, another job? Nora cradled her coffee cup, considering her answer. I haven't thought that far ahead, she admitted. For months I've been focused on survival rather than planning. Wade nodded. Fair enough, but there's a permanent position here if you want it. The ranch is growing, and I could use someone with your skills managing the accounts. The offer surprised her, though perhaps it shouldn't have. You've only known me a few days, she pointed out, and there's still the matter of my reputation. Your work speaks for itself, Wade replied simply. As for your reputation, Sweetwater will form its own opinions in time. Small towns have long memories, but they also value what they can see with their own eyes. Nora felt a rush of gratitude for his straightforward acceptance. Thank you. I'd like to stay, at least for now. Good, Wade said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. The ranch can use you. As the days turned to weeks, Nora found herself increasingly at home at the Double D. The ledgers were brought to perfect order, and she implemented a new system for tracking expenses and income that Wade praised for its clarity. Mrs. Abernathy, initially reserved, warmed to her as Nora proved herself both competent and hard-working. The ranch hands, too, accepted her presence with growing ease, especially after she helped Miguel write letters to his family in Mexico and assisted Carlos with calculations for expanding the irrigation system. Even the suspicious glances from townspeople lessened somewhat when she accompanied Wade on supply runs to Sweetwater. Only Elizabeth Holloway maintained her cold hostility, crossing the street to avoid Nora whenever they happened to be in town simultaneously. The schoolteacher's rejection stung, reminding Nora painfully of the unresolved injustice in Phoenix. One evening in late September, nearly a month after her arrival, Nora was returning from the hen house with a basket of eggs when she noticed a rider approaching the ranch at a hard gallop. She shaded her eyes against the setting sun, recognizing the town's young deputy, Toby Jenkins. Wade emerged from the barn, intercepting the deputy as he reined in his lathered horse. Nora couldn't hear their conversation, but Wade's posture stiffened visibly before he turned toward the house, spotting her. Miss Mitchell, he called, gesturing her over. With a sense of foreboding, Nora approached, clutching the egg basket tightly. Deputy Jenkins brings news from Phoenix, Wade explained, his expression grave. The territorial marshal is investigating the Phoenix Mercantile Bank. Several officials have been arrested, including Director Prescott. Nora's knees nearly buckled. Arrested? For what? Deputy Jenkins removed his hat, looking uncomfortable. Embezzlement and fraud, madam, and... He hesitated, glancing at Wade. They're reopening the investigation into Harold Holloway's death as a potential murder. I see, Nora whispered, her heart racing. Was this vindication at last? There's more, Wade said gently. They're seeking witnesses, including you. The deputy nodded. Marshal's office sent telegrams to all the territorial settlements looking for you, Miss Mitchell. Said you're wanted for questioning as a material witness. Not as a suspect? Nora asked sharply. No, madam. The telegram specifically mentioned you might have evidence pertinent to the case against Prescott and his associates. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by determination. I need to return to Phoenix. Wade studied her face. Are you sure? You could send your evidence with the deputy. Make a statement here. Nora shook her head firmly. I need to see this through in person. I owe it to Mr. Holloway and to myself. Then I'm going with you, Wade stated, as if it were already decided. That's not necessary, Nora protested, though her heart leapt inexplicably at his declaration. This is my fight. Which is precisely why you shouldn't face it alone, Wade countered. Besides, I have business interests in Phoenix I've been neglecting. Deputy Jenkins cleared his throat. The marshal requested Miss Mitchell's presence as soon as possible. We'll leave tomorrow morning, Wade decided. Deputy, would you inform the marshal's office will arrive within the week? Yes, sir, Jenkins agreed, seeming relieved to have completed his mission. I'll head back to town now and send the telegram. After the deputy departed, Nora turned to Wade. You don't have to do this. I know, he said simply, but I'm going to anyway. Later that evening, after explaining the situation to Mrs. Abernathy and making arrangements for the ranch's management during their absence, Wade found Nora on the porch, staring at the star-filled sky. Having second thoughts? He asked, leaning against the railing beside her. No, she replied honestly. Just wondering what awaits in Phoenix. Vindication, hopefully. But returning means facing everyone who believed the worst of me. Wade was quiet for a moment. My father used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what's right, despite your fear. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Wade acknowledged. Taught me everything I know about ranching and about being a man of principle. He turned to face her. That's why I'm going with you to Phoenix, not because I think you need protection, but because standing beside those who fight for truth is the right thing to do. The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. Thank you, she whispered, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the way the moonlight highlighted the strong lines of his face. For a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them, something new and fragile and full of possibility. Then Wade straightened, clearing his throat. We should both get some rest. It's a long ride to Phoenix, and we'll need to leave at first light. Nora nodded, oddly disappointed by the broken moment. Of course. Good night, Wade. Good night, Nora, he replied, using her first name for the first time since they'd met. The sound of it in his deep voice followed her into her dreams that night. The journey to Phoenix took 4 days of hard riding. They traveled light, with only necessities packed on a pack horse that accompanied Wade's stallion and the sturdy mare he'd provided for Nora. The days were filled with dust and determination, the nights with campfires under vast starry skies. During those evenings, as they shared simple meals and conversation away from the distractions of the ranch, Nora learned more about the man who had become her unexpected champion. Wade spoke of growing up in Texas, the son of a small rancher who had lost everything in the war, of coming west with nothing but his father's lessons and his own ambition, of building the Double D from nearly nothing into one of the region's most respected ranches. In turn, Nora shared stories of her childhood in Phoenix, where her father had helped establish the town's first bank and had insisted his daughter receive an education equal to any man's. She spoke of her dreams before scandal had derailed them, of perhaps one day opening her own accounting firm. You still could, Wade observed on their final night before reaching Phoenix. Once your name is cleared, there's nothing stopping you. Nora stared into the flames, considering his words. Perhaps. Though I've found unexpected satisfaction in managing the Double D's accounts. Have you? There was something in Wade's tone that made her look up, meeting his eyes across the fire. I thought perhaps you were just biding your time until something better came along. The double D isn't a temporary solution for me, Nora said quietly. Unless, are you suggesting it should be? Wade shook his head quickly. No, the opposite, in fact. I'm hoping you'll consider staying even after this business in Phoenix is settled. The flickering firelight couldn't hide the sincerity in his expression, nor the hint of vulnerability that surprised her. This was Wade Daugherty, confident rancher, respected businessman showing uncertainty about whether she would remain in his employ. Or was it more than that? Before she could formulate a response, Wade stood abruptly. We should turn in. Tomorrow will be a long day. Phoenix had grown in the month since Nora had fled. New buildings lined Main Street, and unfamiliar faces mingled with those she recognized. As they rode through town toward the marshal's office, she felt the weight of stares and whispers, but kept her head high. Marshal Williams, a tall man with a silver mustache and keen eyes, met them at the door. Miss Mitchell, he greeted her formally. We appreciate you coming forward. I didn't realize I had a choice, Nora replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. You always had a choice, the marshal corrected mildly. You're not accused of any crime. You're here because you were right all along. Those words, simple acknowledgement of the truth she had known for months, nearly undid her composure. Wade's steady presence beside her helped her maintain her dignity as they followed the marshal inside. The interview room was small but well lit. A clerk sat ready to record her statement. For the record, Marshal Williams began, please state your full name. Nora Elizabeth Mitchell. And you were employed at the Phoenix Mercantile Bank until approximately 4 months ago, is that correct? Yes, Nora confirmed. I served as head bookkeeper under both my father, Jonathan Mitchell, and later under Harold Holloway. The questioning continued for hours as Nora recounted everything she had discovered about the embezzlement scheme, from the first discrepancies she'd noticed to Holloway's death and her subsequent ostracism. Wade remained silent throughout, a supportive presence at her side. The evidence you preserved has proven invaluable, the marshal informed her when she had finished. Combined with the bank's records and testimony from Prescott's former clerk, who turned state's evidence last month, it presents a compelling case. What made the clerk come forward? Nora asked. Guilt, partly, Marshal Williams replied, and fear. He discovered that 2 other bank employees who had knowledge of the scheme had died under suspicious circumstances in the past year, not just Holloway. Wade leaned forward. So Prescott is being charged with murder as well as embezzlement? The investigation is ongoing, but yes, we expect additional charges. The marshal turned back to Nora. Miss Mitchell, I must apologize on behalf of the territorial authorities. Your accusations should have been taken seriously from the beginning. It's not your apology I need, Nora said, thinking of the friends and neighbors who had shunned her, the opportunities denied, the home she had been forced to abandon. Perhaps not, the marshal acknowledged, but it comes with this. He slid an official-looking document across the table. The territorial governor has authorized a formal exoneration and public acknowledgement of your role in exposing this corruption. There's also the matter of a reward for information leading to the recovery of the embezzled funds. Nora stared at the document, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. A reward. 10% of the recovered money, the marshal confirmed, which currently stands at just over $3,000. It was a substantial sum enough to restart her life anywhere she chose. Nora glanced at Wade, whose expression remained carefully neutral. I'll need you to remain in Phoenix for at least a week, the marshal continued. There will be a formal hearing where your testimony will be required. After that, you're free to go where you please, though we may call on you if the case goes to trial. I understand, Nora agreed. Is there anything else you need from me today? Just a formal statement from Mr. Daugherty confirming your whereabouts these past weeks, the marshal replied. Standard procedure. After Wade provided his statement, they emerged from the marshal's office to find the afternoon sun slanting across the dusty street. Phoenix continued its bustling activity around them, oblivious to the life-changing conversation that had just taken place. $3,000, Wade said finally, breaking their silence. That's a significant sum. Yes, Nora agreed, still processing everything. Enough to start over anywhere. Wade nodded, his expression still unreadable. You have options now that weren't available before. I do, she acknowledged. Then, gathering her courage, she asked the question that had been forming since their conversation by the campfire. What would you like me to do with those options, Wade? He looked at her then, his careful neutrality giving way to something more vulnerable. It's not my place to tell you what to do with your future, Nora. Perhaps not, she conceded, but your opinion matters to me. Wade glanced around at the busy street. This isn't the place for that conversation. Let's find somewhere to stay, get cleaned up, and then we can talk properly. They secured rooms at the Arizona Hotel considerably more upscale than the establishments Nora had been forced to frequent during her desperate flight from Phoenix. After washing away the dust of travel and changing into fresh clothes, Nora met Wade in the hotel's small dining room. He stood when she approached, pulling out her chair with a gentlemanly flourish that seemed at odds with his usual straightforward manner. You look lovely, he said simply. Thank you, she replied, feeling a flush of pleasure at the compliment. It feels strange to be back in Phoenix as a guest rather than a fugitive. Vindication suits you, Wade observed with a small smile. They ordered dinner, and as they waited, Wade finally broached the subject they had deferred earlier. About your options, Nora, I want you to know that whatever you decide, you'll always have a place at the Double D if you want it. Just a place? Nora asked, finding courage in the warmth of his gaze. Or is there something more you're not saying? Wade's fingers tightened slightly around his water glass. I'm not a man who finds words easily, especially about matters of personal importance. Try, Nora encouraged gently. Please. He drew a deep breath. When you first arrived at Sweetwater, I saw someone fighting for their dignity despite impossible odds. I admired that. As I've come to know you, that admiration has deepened into something more. Nora's heart quickened. Something more? I care for you, Nora, Wade said quietly, more than I expected to. More than might be wise given the circumstances. Why wouldn't it be wise? She pressed, needing to hear him say it plainly. Because you're newly vindicated, with money and opportunities at your disposal, he replied honestly. You could go anywhere, do anything. Why would you choose to remain in Sweetwater, tied to a ranch and a man you've known barely a month? Nora reached across the table, placing her hand over his. Because that man believed in me when no one else would. Because he offered me dignity when others only offered judgment. Because in that month, I've come to admire his integrity, his work ethic, and his quiet strength. Wade turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I care for you too, Nora confirmed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And that when I consider my future, the option that brings me the most joy is one that includes the Double D and you. The smile that transformed Wade's face was like sunrise breaking over the desert, warm and full of promise. I was afraid to hope for that, he admitted. They called me a liar, Nora reminded him softly. You said you'd be the proof I tell truth. I'm holding you to that promise, Wade Daugherty. I aim to keep it, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. For as long as you'll let me. Their dinner arrived, temporarily interrupting the moment, but nothing could diminish the understanding that had blossomed between them. They ate and talked of practical matters, the upcoming hearing, arrangements for their stay in Phoenix, people Nora might need to confront during their time in town. As they finished their meal, Wade hesitated, then reached into his pocket. I have something for you, he said, placing a small object on the table between them. It was a key, old, brass, and slightly worn. What's this? Nora asked, puzzled. The key to the safe in my study, Wade explained, where I keep all the important documents for the Double D. It's always been my private domain, but if you're to be the ranch's permanent bookkeeper, you should have access. The gesture's significance wasn't lost on Nora. This wasn't just about practical access, it was about trust, about making her truly part of the ranch's operations. "Thank you," she said, carefully taking the key. "I'll guard it well." "I know you will," Wade replied, his confidence in her evident. "Now, shall we take a walk? Phoenix evenings are pleasant this time of year." They strolled along the boardwalk, the town's lamps casting pools of golden light as dusk settled. Nora was acutely aware of the curious glances they attracted. The disgraced bookkeeper returned in the company of a handsome stranger. Some turned away when she met their eyes, but others nodded cautiously, perhaps having heard rumors of Prescott's arrest. "Ignore them," Wade murmured, placing his hand at the small of her back. "They'll learn the truth soon enough." "Some already know, I think," Nora observed. "News travels fast in Phoenix." As if to prove her point, a familiar figure emerged from the millinery shop ahead. Sarah Winters, once Nora's closest friend, who had cut all ties when the scandal broke. "Nora," Sarah stopped short, her eyes widening. "Is it really you?" "Hello, Sarah," Nora replied evenly. "Yes, it's me." Sarah glanced nervously at Wade, then back to Nora. We heard about Prescott's arrest, that he was actually guilty of everything you claimed." "Yes," Nora confirmed, fighting to keep bitterness from her voice. "Everything I claimed was true." Shame colored Sarah's cheeks. "Nora, I don't know what to say. We all thought—" "You thought what was convenient," Nora interrupted, unable to maintain her composure entirely. "What was safer than standing beside a friend being unjustly accused?" Wade's hand pressed gently against her back, supportive but not restraining. The small gesture gave her strength. "You're right," Sarah admitted, surprising Nora with her honesty. "I was a coward. Many of us were. I can only say I'm sorry and that I hope someday you might forgive me." The genuine remorse in Sarah's voice softened Nora's anger slightly. "Perhaps someday," she allowed, "but not today. It's still too fresh." Sarah nodded, accepting this. "I understand. Will you be staying in Phoenix?" "Only temporarily," Nora replied. "I have a new home now." She glanced at Wade, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I see," Sarah said, noting the look that passed between them. "Well, I wish you happiness, wherever that home may be." After Sarah continued on her way, Wade guided Nora toward a small park at the end of the street. "You handled that graciously," he observed. "Did I?" Nora sighed. "It didn't feel gracious. It felt unresolved." "Some things take time to heal," Wade said thoughtfully. "Betrayal leaves deep wounds." "Yes," Nora agreed, "though I suppose I should prepare for many such encounters while we're here." They reached the park's small gazebo, illuminated by a single lamp. Wade led her to a bench inside, sitting beside her in the relative privacy of the structure. "You don't have to forgive anyone you don't want to," he said after a moment, "but don't let bitterness over the past cloud the future you're building." "Wise words," Nora acknowledged. "My father used to say something similar, that holding grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." Wade smiled slightly. "Your father and mine would have gotten along well, I think." "I believe they would have," Nora agreed, imagining the two men sharing stories and wisdom. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars appeared overhead. Nora was acutely aware of Wade beside her, his steady presence, his clean scent of soap and leather, the way his hand rested near hers on the bench between them. "May I write to my foreman tomorrow?" Wade asked suddenly. "To let him know we'll be staying in Phoenix through the hearing?" "Of course," Nora replied, surprised by the question. "Why would you need my permission?" "Because," Wade said carefully, "I'd like to tell him that when we return, we'll be bringing your reward money as an investment in the Double D's expansion, as a partner in the operation, if that's something you'd consider." Nora's breath caught. "A business partner?" Wade turned to face her directly, taking her hands in his. "To start with, yes, but Nora, I hope that in time, you might consider a more personal partnership as well." The directness of his statement, so characteristic of the man himself, made her heart soar. I would consider that, she whispered, very seriously. Wade's smile was visible even in the dim light of the gazebo. Then I'll write that letter first thing tomorrow. And I'll begin planning how best to invest in the Double D's future, Nora agreed. Wade's hand reached up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch sending warmth through her. May I kiss you, Nora Mitchell? He asked softly. In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers with gentle certainty, a promise of all that might come. Nora had imagined this moment in the quiet of her room at the Double D, but the reality far surpassed her dreams. Wade's kiss was like the man himself, honest, strong, and unexpectedly tender. When they finally drew apart, Nora kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the feelings coursing through her. When she opened them, Wade was watching her with an expression that made her feel cherished. I should escort you back to the hotel, he said reluctantly. It's getting late. Yes, Nora agreed, equally reluctant to end their evening. We have important letters to write tomorrow. As they walked back toward the hotel, hands intertwined, Nora reflected on the extraordinary turns her life had taken. 4 months ago, she had lost everything. 1 month ago, she had stumbled into Sweetwater Springs desperate for any kind of work. Now she stood vindicated, with a reward forthcoming, and most precious of all, the promise of a future with a man who had believed in her truth before he had proof. What are you thinking? Wade asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. That sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us exactly where we're meant to be, Nora replied honestly. Wade squeezed her hand gently. I'm glad your path led to Sweetwater Springs. So am I, Nora agreed, her heart full. So am I. The week in Phoenix passed in a whirlwind of official testimonies, unexpected reunions, and planning for the future. The formal hearing confirmed everything Nora had claimed, with Prescott and his associates facing serious charges. The territorial governor himself presented Nora with a letter of exoneration and a bank draft for the promised reward. Each night, she and Wade discussed their vision for expanding the Double D, adding more grazing land, improving the breeding stock, perhaps even establishing a small trading post on the property to serve neighboring ranches. Their business discussions inevitably gave way to more personal conversations, their growing feelings for each other deepening with each passing day. On their final evening in Phoenix, Wade escorted Nora to a small restaurant where they had arranged to meet Elizabeth Holloway, who had traveled from Sweetwater at Nora's request. Are you certain about this? Wade asked as they waited for the schoolteacher to arrive. You've been vindicated. You don't owe her an explanation. I do, Nora insisted gently. Not because of my reputation, but because of her uncle. Harold Holloway believed in me when no one else would. His niece deserves to know the whole truth about his death. Elizabeth entered the restaurant precisely on time, her posture rigid and her expression guarded. She hesitated briefly upon seeing them, then approached with visible reluctance. Miss Holloway, Wade stood, pulling out her chair. Thank you for coming. Mr. Daugherty, Elizabeth acknowledged stiffly, sitting without looking directly at Nora. I received your message about new information regarding my uncle. Yes, Nora said, gathering her courage. Elizabeth, Miss Holloway, I know you have every reason to distrust me, but I ask that you listen to what I have to say about your uncle. Not for my sake, but for his. Something in Nora's tone must have reached the younger woman, for she finally met Nora's gaze. Very well, she agreed coolly. I'm listening. Nora took a deep breath and began the story once more, how she had discovered the discrepancies, how Harold Holloway had believed her, how they had worked together to gather evidence. This time, however, she included details she had shared with no one but Wade, the late nights reviewing ledgers in Holloway's office, his growing concern for their safety as they uncovered the extent of the fraud, his final words to her. The day before he died, Nora concluded softly, your uncle told me, truth is a burden, Nora, but one we must carry even when others refuse to help shoulder the weight. He knew the risks he was taking by investigating Prescott, but he believed that honesty and integrity mattered more than personal safety. Elizabeth's cool facade had cracked during Nora's account, tears now streaming silently down her face. "That sounds exactly like Uncle Harold," she whispered. "He always said that principles weren't principles until they cost you something." "He was a good man," Nora agreed, her own eyes damp. "The best I've known, save for my father. I wouldn't be alive today if not for his warning to flee Phoenix after his death." Elizabeth dabbed at her tears with a handkerchief. "All this time I thought, I believed." "You believed what everyone was saying," Wade interjected gently. "When enough people repeat something, it becomes easy to accept as truth." "I should have questioned it," Elizabeth insisted, shame evident in her voice. "Uncle Harold always taught me to think for myself, to examine evidence rather than accept hearsay. I failed him." "We all fail sometimes," Nora said, reaching hesitantly across the table to touch Elizabeth's hand. "What matters is what we do afterward." Elizabeth looked at their hands, then back at Nora's face. "I've treated you abominably in Sweetwater." "You were protecting your uncle's memory as you understood it," Nora replied. "I can't fault you for that." A fragile understanding passed between the women, not quite forgiveness, but the beginning of healing. They ordered dinner and continued talking, Elizabeth sharing stories of her uncle from his younger days, Nora offering recollections from their time working together at the bank. By the time they parted for the evening, something fundamental had shifted. Elizabeth embraced Nora briefly, whispering, "Thank you for not giving up on the truth, for my uncle's sake." As they walked back to their hotel for the last time, Wade took Nora's hand. "You did a good thing tonight," he observed. "Reaching out to Elizabeth couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Nora admitted, "but it was necessary for her uncle's memory, and for me. Some burdens are too heavy to carry alone." "You're not alone anymore," Wade reminded her, squeezing her hand. "Whatever burdens come, we'll carry them together." The next morning dawned bright and clear as they prepared for the journey back to Sweetwater Springs, back to the Double D, which Nora now thought of as home. As Wade secured their bags to the saddles, Marshal Williams approached them outside the hotel. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Daugherty," he greeted them. "I wanted to catch you before you departed." "Is something wrong, Marshal?" Wade asked, instantly alert. "Not at all," the lawman assured them. "Quite the opposite. I wanted to let you know that we've recovered additional funds from Prescott's Nevada operations. There will be a supplemental reward forthcoming." Nora's eyes widened. "How much?" "Another 2,000 at least," the marshal replied. "I'll send word when it's ready for disbursement." After thanking the marshal and saying their farewells, Nora and Wade mounted their horses for the long ride home. $5,000, Wade said thoughtfully as they rode out of town. "That's a substantial investment in the ranch." "Our ranch," Nora corrected, savoring the word. "Our future." Wade smiled, the open happiness on his face still a revelation to Nora. "I like the sound of that." The journey back to Sweetwater Springs felt different from their outward trip later, filled with plans and possibilities rather than uncertainties. Each night by the campfire, they discussed their ideas for the Double D's expansion, their conversations increasingly interwoven with more personal dreams. On their final night on the trail, with the lights of Sweetwater visible in the distance, Wade cleared his throat nervously, an unusual sound from the typically confident rancher. "Nora," he began, setting aside his coffee cup, "there's something I need to ask you before we return to the ranch." Nora looked at him curiously. "What is it?" Wade moved from his place across the fire to kneel beside her, taking her hands in his. "I'd planned to wait, to give you more time to be certain, but these past weeks have shown me that when you find what truly matters, there's no sense in waiting." Nora's heart began to race as she realized what might be happening. "I love you," Wade said simply, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. I think I began falling in love with you that first day in Garrison's store, when you stood your ground despite everyone's judgment. Every day since has only deepened those feelings." "Wade," Nora whispered, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "I'm asking if you'll consider becoming my wife," he continued. "Not just my business partner or the Double D's bookkeeper, but my partner in all things, my family." "Yes," Nora answered without hesitation, the certainty in her heart leaving no room for doubt. "I love you too, Wade Daugherty. I would be honored to be your wife." Wade's face transformed with joy as he pulled a small object from his pocket, a delicate gold ring with a modest diamond that caught the firelight. "It was my mother's," he explained, sliding it onto her finger. "My father gave it to me before he died, saying I should give it to the woman who made me want to be a better man. That's you, Nora." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Nora looked from the glittering stone to Wade's face, seeing her future reflected in his eyes. He rose from his kneeling position to sit beside her, gathering her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally drew apart, Nora rested her head against his shoulder, watching the stars overhead. "From outcast to fiancé in just over a month," she mused. "Life takes the most unexpected turns." "The best kind of turns," Wade agreed, his arms secure around her waist. "Though I suspect Mrs. Abernathy suspected this outcome before either of us did." Nora laughed softly. "She did give me rather knowing looks whenever we were in the same room." "She'll be insufferably pleased with herself," Wade predicted. "But she'll also be your strongest ally at the ranch. The hands respect her almost as much as they fear her." "As they should," Nora agreed, having witnessed the housekeeper's efficient management of the household. They talked late into the night, making plans for their wedding, small and soon, for the ranch's expansion, ambitious but practical, and for their life together, filled with work and purpose and love. When they finally sought their bedrolls for a few hours' rest, it was with the contentment of two people who had found their way home in each other. The following morning, they rode into Sweetwater Springs side by side. Word of Prescott's arrest and Nora's vindication had reached the town ahead of them, transforming the suspicious glances of a month ago into curious and sometimes apologetic nods. Garrison himself emerged from his store as they passed, calling out an awkward greeting that Nora acknowledged with dignified courtesy. "Progress," Wade murmured as they continued toward the Double D. "Of a sort," Nora agreed, "though I suspect their acceptance matters less to me now than it once would have." "That's the thing about finding where you belong," Wade observed. "Other people's opinions lose their power over you." The Double D came into view as they crested the final rise, its buildings golden in the afternoon sun. Mrs. Abernathy stood on the porch, shading her eyes as she watched their approach. The ranch hands paused in their work to wave welcome. "Home," Nora said simply, the word carrying all the meaning that had been missing from her life these past months. "Home," Wade echoed, reaching across to squeeze her hand briefly before they rode down to meet their future. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the Double D's front yard, with wildflowers decorating every available surface and guests from both Sweetwater Springs and Phoenix in attendance. Nora wore a new dress of ivory silk ordered specially from Tucson, while Wade cut a striking figure in his best suit. Judge Patterson from Tucson officiated, his booming voice carrying across the assembled guests as Wade and Nora exchanged their vows. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Wade's kiss was both tender and possessive, drawing cheers from the ranch hands and a rare smile from Mrs. Abernathy. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food, dancing, and enough good wishes to make up for the difficult months Nora had endured. Elizabeth Holloway attended, presenting the couple with a handmade quilt and a heartfelt apology that Nora accepted with grace. Even old Garrison came, bearing a gift and stammered congratulations that suggested he'd finally recognized the error of his initial judgment. As the party wound down and guests began departing, Wade led his bride away from the festivities toward the small rise behind the main house. There, In the light of the setting sun, he showed her the foundation markers for what would soon be their new home. "I thought we'd live in the main house," Nora said, surprised. "Eventually it will be part of the ranch operations," Wade explained. "But I wanted us to have something that was ours from the beginning, something we build together." Nora moved among the markers, visualizing the home that would rise from this spot their home, with views of the entire valley and the mountains beyond. "It's perfect," she declared, turning back to her husband with shining eyes. "When do we begin?" "Construction starts next week," Wade replied, clearly pleased by her reaction. "It should be ready by Christmas if the weather holds." "And if it doesn't, we'll manage," Nora said confidently. "We've overcome far greater challenges than building delays." Wade pulled her into his arms, the golden light of sunset turning her hair to flame. "Have I told you today how much I love you, Mrs. Daugherty?" "You have," Nora replied, savoring the new name that represented all she had gained. "But I wouldn't object to hearing it again." "I love you," Wade obliged, his voice dropping to that intimate tone reserved only for her. "And I'm the luckiest man in the Arizona territory to call you my wife." "And I love you," Nora returned, "my champion, my partner, my proof." As they stood together watching the sun sink below the horizon, Nora reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From the depths of despair in Phoenix to the height of joy at the Double D, her path had been neither straight nor easy. But standing beside the man who had believed in her when belief was most precious, Nora knew with absolute certainty that every step, even the painful ones, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. 5 years later, Nora stood on the front porch of their home, watching as Wade taught their 3-year-old son, Thomas, to sit astride his first pony. Their 6-month-old daughter, Emma, slept peacefully in her cradle beside Nora, undisturbed by her brother's excited shouts. The Double D had flourished under their joint management, expanding to nearly twice its original size. The trading post they had established now served ranchers from miles around, and their breeding program had produced some of the finest cattle in the territory. Wade's dream of building something lasting had been realized beyond even his hopes. Nora's vindication had been complete, not just legally through the exoneration and Prescott's eventual conviction, but in the respect she had earned throughout the region for her business acumen and integrity. The reward money had been invested wisely, yielding returns that continued to fuel the ranch's growth. Mrs. Abernathy still ruled the main house, now converted partly into offices for the ranch operations, though she had mellowed somewhat with age and the joy of helping raise the Daugherty children. She emerged from the house now, carrying a tray with lemonade. "They've been at it for an hour," the housekeeper observed, nodding toward Wade and Thomas. "The boy has his father's stubbornness and your determination. Heaven help us all when he's older." Nora laughed, accepting a glass gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy. Not just for the lemonade, but for everything. These past 5 years wouldn't have been the same without you." The older woman's expression softened. "It's been my pleasure to watch this family grow, Mrs. Daugherty. This ranch is what it was always meant to be now." As Wade led Thomas and the pony back toward the house, Nora felt a rush of gratitude for all that life had given her. The path hadn't been easy, but the destination had been worth every hardship. "Mama, did you see?" Thomas called excitedly. "I rode all by myself." "I saw," Nora confirmed, descending the steps to meet them. "You're a natural horseman, just like your father." Wade lifted Thomas from the pony, setting him on the ground before turning to his wife. "He'll be managing the herd before we know it," he predicted, leaning down to kiss Nora softly. "Not too soon, I hope," Nora murmured against his lips. "Let him be a child first." "Always so wise," Wade replied, pulling back to look at her with the same admiration that had been in his eyes from the beginning. "How did I get so fortunate?" "I ask myself the same question every day," Nora confessed, linking her arm through his as they walked back toward the house, Thomas skipping ahead. That evening, after the children were asleep and the ranch had settled into night's quiet rhythms, Nora and Wade sat together on their porch swing, watching the stars emerge above the mountains. I received a letter from Elizabeth today, Nora mentioned. She's engaged to that doctor from Tucson she's been corresponding with. That's good news, Wade said. She deserves happiness after everything. Yes, Nora agreed. She asked if we would attend the wedding. It's in 3 months. Of course we will, Wade replied without hesitation. Family obligations permitting. Family. The word still filled Nora with wonder. Sometimes the family they had created together, the extended family of the ranch's workers and the community they had built. From having nothing, she had come to possess everything that truly mattered. I was thinking, Wade said after a comfortable silence, about expanding the house next spring, adding another bedroom or two. Nora turned to look at him curiously. Are you planning on more children that I should know about? Wade chuckled. Not immediately, but perhaps in the future. And we could use a proper library for all those books you keep ordering from back east. A library would be wonderful, Nora admitted, thinking of the growing collection currently stored in whatever spaces they could find. Though I'm not sure we need to plan for more children just yet. Thomas and Emma keep us quite busy enough. True, Wade agreed easily. But I like planning for possibilities. It's what we've always done best together, isn't it? See potential and build toward it? Nora nestled closer against his side, contentment washing over her. Yes, she said softly. That's exactly what we do best. As the night deepened around them and the ranch settled into slumber, Nora thought again of that fateful day in Sweetwater Springs, when a desperate woman with nothing but the truth had met a man willing to believe in her. From that unlikely beginning had grown everything she now cherished: love, family, purpose, home. They had built their life together word by word, promise by promise, truth by truth. And in the end, Wade had been right. He had indeed become the proof she told truth in ways neither of them could have imagined that first day. Some called it fate. Others might call it justice. But sitting beside her husband as the stars wheeled overhead, Nora Daugherty simply called it love, the kind of love that transforms lives, heals wounds, and builds futures that once seemed impossible to imagine. And in the heart of the Arizona territory, on a ranch called Double D, that love continued to grow stronger with each passing day, as certain and enduring as the mountains that stood witness to their story.